I thought the castles were concentrated in a small area, which is where we're going. But along the road there are a lot of buildings like those, and they're really interesting because they've changed the style of the town. We came across a cemetery, most likely for very wealthy people. And what caught my attention the most is the observation tower in the background. Today we're going to start the most ambitious and probably the craziest adventure of our lives, because we intend to go all the way around the largest island in all of China. And we're talking about 1,500 kilometers and approximately between 10 and 14 days of constant pedaling.
At least we're going to try, because honestly we have zero experience. Especially because we're carrying all our stuff, including the camping gear, and we don't know what's going to happen. But before we start pedaling, we'll have to drive 6 hours to a city called Zhangjiang to take the ferry that will take us to the island.
And since I lost my license, this time we're depending on fur, so let's get going right away because it's going to be a pretty nerve-wracking trip. This is our gear for the whole week, so let's see. I should mention that my saddlebags haven't arrived yet. If you notice, there's nothing on my bike except that decathlon bag. So, for now, everything is in Noelia's bags, which makes them pretty heavy, but we've already ordered the saddlebags and they're going to arrive at the hotel in the area where we're going to take the ferry. In the meantime, we put everything we need here, which is all the camping supplies, and let's see if we can make it. Because I'm asking myself, why on earth would we want to leave the comfort of our home now that the weather is so nice? But anyway, our ride is here. This steed isn't ours. We rented it through an app. We're about to celebrate Chinese New Year, but we needed a way to move the bikes. In this case, I think we paid 2,000 yuan for 3 days, which is about 4,500, 5,000 pesos more or less. And while it's not the most optimal, I think it's doing the job well. And something really interesting is the way you unlock the car, because it's done through the app of the company that rents you the car. It's time to go. How are you doing, Fufilupi? Good. We were supposed to leave much earlier. If you notice, it's already getting dark. And Noelia hasn't driven in 6 years, but you do know how, right, Fufil?
Yes, I also brought a first aid kit.
No, then everything will be fine. Well, we're already in Noelia's first awkward situation. They're already cursing her out because she got into the ETC lane. And the guy behind was honking like crazy. She has to go further.
Here?
Yes. There, yes. Here on Chinese highways, people usually have electronic toll collection, but this car doesn't have it, so we have to use cards every time.
This road is a bit creepy, isn't it?
The road is really creepy, and that's because we're arriving at our first stop where we're going to spend the night. It's a pretty small town, but with a lot of history. So, it's going to be a really nice trip, but I think at this hour we won't be able to see anything, so we'll probably go straight to the hotel, which, by the way, is a very special hotel. It promises a lot. The thing is, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And just look at the road, there's absolutely nothing. There are no cars, it's dark, you can't see a single building. But it had good ratings on the platform, so it can't be that bad. Yeah, it's this way. Well, it says, no, yeah, we can go through here. Ah, I think that's the hotel, I think that's the one. I told you it would be cool, I think it'll be good. Where are we? I have no idea, but the hotel looks pretty good. It's like a castle in the middle of nowhere. But the curious thing is that this is just one of many other castles that are in this area, and they have a very interesting explanation. For now, I want to show you the room and the complex because it's crazy. I think this is the reception. Look at how beautiful this hotel is. It's amazing. It has all the vibes of a youth hostel.
Let's see how the room is.
Let's see. It's pretty standard. It's pretty crappy.
We were already saying we're going to live like royalty. What, didn't you see the photos of the place?
I only saw the photos of the castle.
No, what do you mean?
But it's nice.
It's comfortable. I just expected a castle.
263 went for the room. Let's see, in Europe that would be very cheap. We've already checked in, we've already seen the room, and now we're going to have some dinner. But the hotel doesn't have a restaurant and there doesn't seem to be anything nearby. So we're going to go out for a little walk to see what we can find, and hopefully there's at least one restaurant. But it doesn't look very good. Everything is dark around here. There aren't any sidewalks, so we have to walk along the road until we find a restaurant. If we even find a restaurant. I imagine that's the name of the village we're in. And look, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, you come across places like this, the Communist Party flag. I imagine this is like the equivalent of the municipal palace or the government palace. Well, according to this, we've arrived at the food street that the hotel owner promised us. But it's not like you can say, wow, so much food. I'm not seeing much.
No, please, don't fill me up with all the street food.
Oh no, please, don't let me gain 20 kilos.
Oh no, please, if not tomorrow I won't be able to have breakfast. It should be called the no foods.
This seems to be the only restaurant, and the owner told us they're open until about 3 in the morning. Who comes to eat here at 3 in the morning? Hi, companion.
Come in, have a seat.
Thank you.
Is this the menu? Ah, that's the menu. What's there now? What's there? To eat. What's there to eat?
Food?
Yeah, that food. What do you have left?
They don't seem to understand you.
Do they speak Cantonese here?
Cantonese? Yes.
Is it rice? What is that? It's just that we're not understanding each other. Alright, I'll order some dumplings. How many come in an order? 14? What are they filled with? Pork? Are those dumplings too?
What?
Are those dumplings too? She doesn't understand me. She left laughing. Because I'm speaking to her in Mandarin, she doesn't understand me, and I don't understand her because she answers me in Cantonese. So basically it's like being in any other country where you don't speak the language. The good thing in China is that all the characters are the same. So we communicated using the menu, and that's what we were able to do. Yeah, look, that's it. As far as I know, they were small orders because they cost what a small order would cost in Shenzhen. But they're really interesting because normally jiaozi aren't transparent, but in this case they're different. And just look at this. For 20 yuan, the amount of noodles they served us, and these really do have some meat in them.
These are the strangest jiaozi I've ever seen in my life.
They're good, right? Delicious. I just asked the owner of the restaurant how I can order these delicious things somewhere else in China, and she told me, you can't. It's a local specialty known as Baihe Jiaozi. We only make them like this here, and it's a shame because they're exquisite. In fact, I would come here just for these. 10 out of 10. Good morning from Baihe, which is located within Kaiping, where we're going to see some impressive buildings. But the one behind me is just the beginning because that one isn't finished, and it's probably the least impressive of all the ones we're going to see today. But to get there, we still have to drive about 10 more minutes. That's where most of the historic buildings recognized by United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization in 2007 are located. The road is pretty interesting because I thought, that the castles or the dials were concentrated in a small area, which is where we're going. But along the road there are a lot of buildings like those, and they're really interesting because they've changed the style of the town. And suddenly it feels like a mix between Europe and China, and it confuses you, especially because they're like isolated buildings. It's not like the whole town is the same style, but as you drive down the road, suddenly a castle appears out of nowhere. Halfway down the road we came across a cemetery, most likely for wealthy people, and it's quite peculiar. We had seen other cemeteries in China, but this one really caught our attention because of the shapes of the tombs. Also, each tomb is huge. They're probably the tombs of entire families who have been buried here. And if you notice, there are still empty spots, probably already bought by some other families, if that's how it works. But the tombs are very beautiful, and some of them unfortunately seem to have been forgotten, but there are others that look relatively new, like these ones that are made of concrete. They have some wishes, probably from the family, and what caught my attention the most is the observation tower in the background. How long have these tombs been here that you can't even see anymore? It's like the grass grows over the tombstone or the mausoleum and covers them completely. So it doesn't even feel like you're in a cemetery. Now that we've reached the top of the hill, maybe it's a good time to tell you the story of this place, because otherwise, this cemetery doesn't make any sense. And right now we're in a city called Kaiping, which back in the 19th century was quite a poor place. That's why many of its inhabitants were willing to embark on journeys of more than 6 months by ship. On those journeys, it's estimated that there was a mortality rate of up to 30% due to the difficulties of crossing the ocean and the lack of technology. Many of them went to the United States, to Mexico, to Peru, and there were others who even went as far as Europe. Many of them never managed to make enough money to return home, but there were many others who made great fortunes. However, at that time, China was going through a rather turbulent period in which there was a lot of insecurity in the streets, especially for people who returned from other countries, because it was known that they had a lot of money. And back then, a boat trip like that was extremely expensive, and only wealthy people could afford it to return to this country. Therefore, as soon as they returned, they looked for ways to protect their fortune, and one of them was by building this type of building known as diaolo, which in Chinese can be translated as fortresses. And actually, contrary to what one might think, these buildings were not built to show off wealth, but to protect it. Inside them, entire families often lived, and sometimes even the fortune of the whole village was kept there. But in this case, this diaolo is here to protect the cemetery of the region. And in this country, cemeteries usually don't look like it, since they're established on hills or in places with spectacular views. Since in this country the location is chosen according to the Eastern discipline of Feng Shui, for this, a study of the energies of a place and its location must be done. That would be getting into details that I don't have, but the point is that they're not chosen randomly and they're quite expensive. And in this country, a tomb can cost almost as much as an apartment, which is why nowadays many people simply prefer cremation. But the price of tombs or the land, it's not the reason why they needed a watchtower. In China, it's customary for people to be buried with money or resources to use in the afterlife. Actually, that tradition is still practiced today. The truth is that nowadays people are not only buried with cash, but also with iPhones, tablets, computers, or any kind of technology they consider necessary for life beyond death. Therefore, they needed a watchtower to prevent their riches from being stolen. But it's worth mentioning that in this country it's considered bad luck or a bad omen to live near a cemetery, so only the guards would live here. Meanwhile, the families lived in the village that is further away, which we are going to visit right now. Now we're going to visit a mansion that was built in a different era, when the situation was no longer so unsafe. And apparently he was a very wealthy person, because he not only built one of the castles, but he built an entire complex with a series of beautiful gardens which today have become a very famous tourist attraction. And just look at the tourist center. It's a 5A attraction, and you know that in the Chinese ranking, 5As is the highest a tourist attraction can have. Here you have the ticket prices. If you only want to enter this area, it's 100 yuan. The thing is, around this place there are many resorts you can visit. However, it's not necessary for you to buy the tickets or come here, because all around the village you can see this kind of buildings. Let's say if you want to pay, it's to walk through the gardens. Obviously, this is a nicer part. It represents luxury on a larger scale. So it's worth it if you come exclusively for this, but if you're just passing by and don't want to spend money, just driving or biking around the area is more than enough. It's very beautiful. We're already entering the complex and it feels like a hacienda, but in a Chinese style.
It's really interesting that in this part of the complex they have some diaolo but in miniature size. And actually there used to be more than 4,000 scattered throughout the territory. But since it's impossible to see them all, you can come here to see the most iconic ones.
This one is small but beautiful, while the one in the back is bigger. I'm not sure where this one is, but I've seen it online. Look at the craftsmanship involved in building these things. Here, everyone added their own touch. For example, this one here was made more like a castle, not just like a tall tower. By the way, the elevation was very important. Not only because from up there they had a panoramic view and could see danger coming from afar, but also because this was an area prone to flooding. In fact, it's said that this type of building saved the lives of many wealthy families in the area. And just look at the height. Obviously, this is a scale model, but there were some that had up to 10 floors. And if you notice, many of these structures had holes like these. That's because from there you could shoot at the criminals who came close, and you could attack them from above and from a distance. There were also some that had them in the basement area. Look, this one has its protection towers here. To give you an idea of the size of the miniature, over there in front is the real size. This building was the security center of the Z family. It has 5 floors and all the doors are made of steel. Something very interesting is that the walls are 30 inches thick, which means they are pretty thick walls. All these buildings are made of concrete, which at that time was not common for a village. For example, when we lived in Yangshuo, we realized that many buildings were made with adobe. At that time, that was a cheap material, an accessible material they could get, and it didn't make having a house something prohibitive. However, here there was enough money to build with concrete. Now we're going to go inside and see the house of Xi Weili, the Chinese businessman who built this whole complex around 1926. He was an immigrant who, in the mid-18th century, decided to leave China because of the lack of opportunities and the great poverty that existed at that time. That's why he decided to seek opportunities in the United States. There he devoted himself to trade and real estate activities related to the Chinese community, which at that time lived in the same city. While he was there, he managed to make a lot of money, which he regularly sent back to China as remittances. And little by little, those remittances became everything you see around us. This place has a lot of meaning, not only for the people or for the family, but also for the government. And the fact that such a successful person eventually decided to return to his country is, for them, the ultimate symbol of patriotism. That's why this place, or this tourist complex, has received a lot of support for its preservation. And that's why 100 years later, this place is so well preserved, and honestly, it's really well preserved. Look how beautiful it is. Everything is practically intact. Obviously, there's been some wear and tear over the 100 years these structures have stood, but look, the kitchen is perfectly preserved. And something very interesting is that they brought back traditions from the United States or Europe, like the bathtub. If you notice, many of the details look rather Western. For example, this bathroom had a toilet, which at that time was not so common.
You know what's really crazy? Seeing the portraits of Mr. Li in a suit, because just imagine, in that era, he would walk the streets of China wearing a suit. That era must have been like, what is that man wearing?
Back then and even now. In China, people don't usually wear suits, and in fact, the Chinese word for suit is xizhuang, which means Western clothing. So just imagine, back then we're talking about 1920, 1930, Xi Weili's family was walking around very well dressed, wearing Western suits. Well, that's because they were quite wealthy and they were probably one of the few families who could afford to have a camera back then. Can you imagine the moment when he returned after spending his whole life in the United States? The people in the village must have seen him as an alien. Because keep in mind that back then there was no internet, no phone calls. The only thing you could do was describe things through letters. So it must have been crazy to sit and listen to his stories about the cars they had in the United States, about hamburgers and hot dogs. It keeps getting smaller and smaller. We're already around the 5th floor and suddenly here I have to go all hunched over. I can't fit. Ah, they have an altar. Look. On the top floor they have an altar for the founder, Xi Weili, and for his wife. It's a pretty luxurious altar and it often surprises me. The symbols of extreme opulence that you can find in China, when most people associate it with a rather poor place because of its 100 years of humiliation. But no, here in China, there are some mansions and buildings that leave you speechless, like this complex. Beyond the buildings, there are some really interesting structures. What is that? For example,
I imagine it's like one of those places where you go and sit to read and look elegant.
Well, yes, it does look pretty elegant. Maybe it was left unfinished.
Don't you feel like this place just makes you have more and more questions? For example, I was wondering, how did he get this land back then? Who designed the houses? Or what was the value of United States money back then compared to the money in China?
Yes, that's what I was saying, that I don't know how rich he would have been in the United States because obviously here the money was worth much more. If you brought $1 here, you could buy a lot more things than if you were in the United States. And surely that helped him build this crazy place. Just between the houses or between the mansions, he decided to build a hallway so the sun wouldn't hit him. Now we're leaving the tourist area to walk around the town and show you some of the buildings that aren't necessarily well preserved. And we come across places like this, but there are many. This is like one of those exotic buildings, but you can see that people still live here. Look, here they have their little dogs. They're so cute. Look at them. They're so happy that we're here to visit them. How cute, how cute. Obviously, we can't go inside the house, but I wanted to show you a devil that was back here. I don't know how to get there, but it looked impressive. And as I was telling you, normally these devil buildings were used as observation and lookout posts, not just for one family, but sometimes for a group of families or even a whole community. And that's probably the case with this tower we're about to see. Like in the lower part, it's pretty simple, but what really gives it that special touch is the top part where it has these observation towers. Apparently each one of these has its own plaque and is numbered. In fact, they all have a QR code where you can probably see information. They do a good job because they use these eye-catching buildings to set up businesses. For example, down here there's a restaurant.
Shall we go up the tower?
I think we can, right? Apparently here you can go up the tower. This one is open, but look how beautiful it is. They put a garden here so you can sit and have a drink, so you can sit and eat with this spectacular background. I mean, where else do you find things like this? Let's see what's inside. Furfilupi, what do you think? Was there supposed to be 3 before or what?
Maybe.
Hey, and this one is free, okay? When we found it, nobody had told us anything. Look, this was probably like the living room, the kitchen. Oh, and there's also a way down. They had a basement. Look. Look, what a view just from here.
And it's really funny how they're scattered around, right? And they built their city, their new buildings.
It's a really curious sight because a while ago I flew the drone and you go flying around there. And suddenly a castle appears, then another castle, then fields of agriculture, and then another castle.
And another thing I've noticed as we were driving by is that there are new buildings that still have architectural elements very similar to this. So you can see that many of the modern buildings still have a Western influence. And that must have been because these buildings existed for a long time.
And look, over there in the distance you can see the one we're gonna visit now, which is in the middle of what would be the old town called Chiricán. So let's go over there, because that's where we're going to eat.
Well, when we arrived at the old city, we realized that the place is huge and there are a lot of interesting things about that place. But today's daylight is already fading, so what we're going to do is stay here for the night and tomorrow. Now we're really going to enter the old city because we also need to buy a ticket. But this time we're not going to stay in a hotel. Instead, we've decided to stay at the campsite to try out everything we bought for camping on this bike trip and see if it works. Let's see how it goes for us.
For 168, it includes the right to camp, a chicken, and a campfire, I think. It's with friends.
The combo is called Camp With Me.
The first step is that we have to stop here in the kitchen so they can prepare our chicken for us. And why do I say this is a kitchen? Well, you probably noticed that there are some little stoves or ovens here, and this is where they're going to make the chicken for us. Ni hao, how are you? Do you make the chicken right here?
Yes.
Here's my ticket. Great.
It'll be in about 90 minutes.
An hour and a half. Okay, so let's set up our camp first and then come back. Here they're gonna make our chicken in these little adobe ovens, and here is all the firewood, so it's a nice experience, and at night you can come here to light the campfire and eat. I couldn't understand anything they said. Since they speak Cantonese here, when they try Mandarin, their strong accent and mix of Cantonese words make it hard for me to understand.
Well, this is the place where we're going to camp in the end. This is everything we brought. Sleeping bags so we don't get cold at night. Air mattresses, 2 mats to put under the air mattresses, and the tent.
We need to look for a tutorial because we have no idea how to set up a tent. It's really tough. I should have brought a hammer. Caveman, how does the Tarzan song go? Son of man, look for me. We're going to have to be really in touch with our natural selves, huh?
Okay, I got it.
Oh, so it sets itself up? Damn, so it's wrong from the start. Oh, so the structure goes outside? It's really weird, isn't it? I mean, this can't be like this. It doesn't make sense.
They're putting it together wrong.
Do you guys know?
This is the first time we're using this?
The first time. You guys are professionals, right? Do you go camping often?
We are trainers.
Oh, I see.
They put it upside down.
Ah, I see it now.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. I had never felt such a deep mix of gratitude and humiliation as I do right now, but at least we have a tent now. I'm thinking it's a good thing we decided to try it out tonight, because if this had happened to us in the middle of the road, right before dark one time, we almost had to sleep on the ground because we couldn't set it up.
We're finally on our way to get our chicken. Once we finished setting up our tent, even though it was hard, we managed to get it done.
Oh, how wonderful. This is the local specialty. It's known as yaoji, and they told us it has a very specific way of being prepared. The thing is, it's a whole chicken plus 2 corn cobs and a ton of sweet potatoes. It's a pretty random adventure. We weren't planning to camp today, but we said it's better to try it today. Better to try it now than to end up with little experience in a dark place in the middle of the road later.
You saw it. We didn't even know how to set up the tent.
But we decided to stay here because there's still an amazing place we need to see and we couldn't miss it. So we decided to extend our stay, and tomorrow we're going to take you to see the most impressive part of Kaiping.
We've already finished dinner, we're back in the tent, and we were getting ready to sleep. We just realized it's only 8 o'clock at night and it's already completely dark. But anyway, are you ready for the sleepover?
I'm ready.
Let's see how we wake up. Good morning, we just woke up in our humble home in nature. Today we're going to visit the ancient city of Chiricán, which is the most interesting thing in this town. So we need to gather all our stuff, put it in the car, and get out of here to make the most of our time. Because today we have to return our car in another city, so let's go. This is turning out to be more complicated than I thought. I guess it's just a matter of getting the hang of it.
After a night of little sleep, we finally arrived at the reason why we decided to extend our stay in this place. Its name is the ancient town of Chiricán, and it was founded 350 years ago as a river port for trade located on the banks of the Tangyang River. This place was very important because rice, silk, and all kinds of goods were transported from here to the interior of Guangdong province. And it was precisely this area that benefited the most from all the money that returned from abroad with the immigrants. Therefore, as soon as we enter, you will realize that it is an area completely different from everything around it. Because while there are many agricultural fields and a lot of greenery around, inside there is practically a medieval European city combined with Chinese architecture. And now you'll see what it's all about. First, we have to buy our tickets and just look at the infrastructure they have for this town. Here they are. The ticket prices are 150 per person, and you can also add the cart to go around, the cruise, and many other services. Traveling in China can get expensive if you buy everything. Welcome to the ancient city of Chiricán. It's amazing to enter because from the very beginning you're greeted by an atmosphere completely different from what you'd find anywhere else in China. You'd expect to find this view in Europe, not here. What a wonderful place, right? It's like entering Universal Studios or something like that.
But in real life,
because this really is a real town. Even though they charge admission today, this is the real center.
you might be noticing that this dialogue is very different from the structures on the sides of the river. That's because the buildings we're seeing are no longer dialogues. They are kilos or chilos, which are very characteristic buildings in coastal areas of China and where there was a lot of export and import. We've seen it in cities like Xiamen, like Haikou, which is where we're going to arrive in a few days, and today we're seeing it in the ancient town of Chiricán. But this tells us a lot about the area we're in right now. The dialos, which were mostly found in the rural part of Kaiping, served as both residences and fortresses, whereas the kilos have a more commercial function. And the thing is, the ancient town of Chiricán is where most of the commercial activity in this area used to be concentrated. As I was telling you yesterday while we were visiting the buildings, I started having a lot of questions about how the Chinese made money abroad, what jobs they did, and how they sent money so their families here could build the dialos. All those kinds of details. So I did my research and found a couple of really interesting facts. For example, consider a Chinese person who moved to the United States. While in China, the annual salary was $5 to $10 at the time, in the United States, they could make $30 to $60 a month. That is, they earned several years' worth of money in just 1 month. Obviously, they had their expenses, but of course, they were also able to save. And if there's one thing that characterizes the Chinese, it's being thrifty. Now, once they earned that money, how did they send it to their families in China? Well, they did it through a system called Xiaopi. It was a letter with money or a letter with a remittance certificate once it arrived in China. That's when the currency exchange was done. The conversion was something like $1 equals about 1.5 silver yuan. Because at that time, currency exchange was done through local exchange houses and the rate wasn't very stable, to say the least. Once the money was converted, over the years, buildings like these started to be constructed. The dialos, but not all of them, were built by wealthy people. There were community dialos, people who came together. Each person contributed a part of the money, and once they built them together, they were much safer. Inside the fortress, this is very different from the fortresses that wealthy people built. The people who built it as a community did it in a much more modest way, while wealthy people made the keeps bigger and more ostentatious each time. Because eventually, building a keep also became a sign of status and local success. But then, you might be wondering, how much did it cost to build a keep back then? As they say, there were all kinds of prices. A simple keep, or the ones built by communities, usually cost between 1,000 and 3,000 United States dollars. From there, we move on to a category that was bigger, more ostentatious, possibly built by individuals, which ranged from 5,000 to 10,000 United States dollars. And then there were some very extravagant ones that exceeded 10,000 United States dollars. Now, one United States dollar from that time is equivalent to $35 today. So you can do the math yourselves to see how much each thing cost and how much each person earned.
The views in this place are surreal. They really look like something out of a dream or a fairy tale in a strange mix between East and West. From the infrastructure they set up for you to take pictures to the little boats and the castle in the background, it all makes you feel like you're in a real Chinese medieval movie. It sounds really strange, but it's true, and just look at the little boats you can ride in. We chose not to do it because of time constraints and because it's a bit expensive, but I definitely think that if you come with enough time, it's absolutely worth staying around here and thoroughly exploring the streets of this place, which, by the way, have a lot of live performances. The only thing you have to do to find out which ones they are is scan the QR code, and it tells you the schedules and in which area of the park. I already want to call it that, even though it's actually the old city center, the historic district, but I call it a park because that's pretty much what it has become. And if you don't believe me, just look in front of me. There's a Kentucky Fried Chicken next to one of the most iconic buildings in the area, which, by the way, is decorated for Christmas.
Nothing better to show Western influence than a good Christmas.
Look at these impressive buildings that display the date 1926, and why 1926? Well, it was back then when many of the immigrants who left China during the hard times returned. That's why the Liwan Mansion, which we visited yesterday, was also established around that time, around 1920 or so. And it was also during that time when many of those buildings were constructed, and this one is no exception. Many of these buildings have been renovated, and I wouldn't be surprised if they've even been improved to turn them into a tourist attraction like what they are today. And if you've seen our videos before, you probably know that one of the ways the government alleviates poverty is by bringing tourism to areas where there is no industry, where there aren't many opportunities, and where people normally used to work exclusively in agriculture. And Kaiping is no exception, so having this kind of buildings, and the fact that in 2007 they were named a World Heritage Site by United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization was a blessing that was celebrated in a big way. And it's not just that they found a way to make use of these kinds of buildings, but they also gave jobs to a lot of people. Just imagine the number of jobs that places like this must generate every year. Honestly, that's one of the things I admire most about how things are done in this country. Another interesting aspect of that time is the way people dressed, because in China, people have never been used to wearing suits like in the West. However, people who returned from abroad also brought back these kinds of traditions, and suddenly people started dressing like that. Therefore, a really interesting mix was created that you can find in the shops in the area where you can rent the outfit to take a picture. And here you can see some of the outfits that came about as a result of this interesting mix. Imagine what it must have been like back then when most of your neighbors were farmers. Suddenly you come out in a suit and tie with a hat from your castle. The others must have seen them as real aliens. I think there's someone famous there because there's a big crowd and cameras and everything. Let's find out what's going on. Let's see what happens. It's like a fashion runway. That's crazy. No wonder there's such a crowd. Look at the number of people here. The whole park gathered in this spot. The kids are going wild. I think some of them might be influencers or something like that, but if there's one thing we've learned in China, it's that anything is possible. Just look at where we are. The further you go, the more amazing this place becomes, especially since Christmas hasn't happened here. And look, it's the beginning of February and the whole downtown is still decorated like it's some kind of Chinese Western North Pole.
They even have a church.
I wonder if this really was a church back then, but let's take a look and see what a church is like in this place. Now it's a museum. Look, here it says exhibition hall. I imagine that at some point it really was a church, but nowadays, well, it's practically a museum. I wonder where the chapel was. Well, it seems like it really is a church. On the second floor they have the chapel. And there were even some Chinese people praying. It makes sense. When people came back from Europe, they didn't just bring clothing, architecture, or food, but they also brought religion. And it's interesting, since evangelists are usually the ones who spread religion to other places. But in this case, it was the immigrants themselves who returned to their country who did that work and as a result established this church. In the year 1922, which is when it seems that most of these buildings were inaugurated. It seems that now we're reaching the old part, maybe an area where the buildings aren't so renovated, or at least that's how it looks. And it looks very beautiful. It has a lot of charm because here the vines are already covering the buildings. Oh, look at this little group of explorers. They look so nice with their vests, going around as tourists in a group. Goodbye, friends. Imagine the school field trips they must have in this country, considering that right now we're in the middle of nowhere. This place is spectacular.
We are totally impressed. Honestly, my eyes still can't believe what they're seeing. Because when you enter the park, everything is so renovated and new that you say, nah, I still can't believe this is real. And then you come to this part where these buildings look even older and you say, now this I can believe. And you see the church with its registration plaque, and inside it has exhibition rooms with the date the church was founded. There's all kinds of information. That's when you say, oh, so yes, it's real, the church is real, all these buildings are real, and yes, the clothes they used to wear back then are real too. I mean, it's like now it really hits you that this is how life was here. That's what's impressive, walking through the streets where that way of life actually took place.
Well, today we visited one of the most interesting places we've been to in this country, and I know I say that a lot, but every time I say it, it's true. We're going to end today's video here, but don't miss the next one, because we're going to get to the ferry that will take us to Hainan Island, where we'll begin our journey. That's all for now. Goodbye.